is Evelyn Mae Parker. I am 27 years old, and this is the story of how I was evicted from my grandparents' home in Ohio. My parents and my younger sister Jessica gave me exactly 2 days to pack my bags, secretly hoping to watch me completely fall apart. They desperately wanted me to cry and beg, so they could use those tears to prove to everyone that I was unstable and ungrateful. But I did not give them the dramatic fight they wanted, choosing instead to just nod quietly while standing in the kitchen doorway. I kept my hands wrapped firmly around a cold mug of coffee, feeling a strange sense of peace. I did not need to scream or panic, because I already knew exactly what kind of secret weapon was waiting for them inside the upstairs safe. This home in Ohio was the only place in the world where I ever truly felt valued and chosen. It was within these very walls that my grandparents taught me the most precious lessons about unconditional love, true kindness, and what it actually means to be decent. When my grandmother began losing her memory and my grandfather's health slowly weakened, I immediately stepped up to be their sole caregiver. I was the only one present day and night, carefully managing every single pill organizer, cooking their daily meals, and making sure they were never left alone in the dark. Meanwhile, my parents always had a convenient excuse ready, constantly claiming they were far too busy with out-of-town business trips and important client dinners to lend a helping hand. My younger sister Jessica was somehow even worse, treating their heartbreaking decline like a minor inconvenience that ruined her weekend aesthetic. She would drop by occasionally just to snap a few fake smiling pictures for her social media before rushing off to go partying with her friends. They callously left me to shoulder the entire physical and emotional burden of caregiving, never once asking what it cost me to be the one who stayed. My grandfather silently watched every single moment of their bone-chilling indifference, seeing right through their fake concern and realizing they were only waiting for their inheritance. Before I tell you the brilliant decision my grandfather made to stop them, please drop a comment letting me know exactly where you are watching from right now, because I really want to see how far my story has traveled. After my grandmother passed away, my grandfather became incredibly quiet, but possessed a heartbreakingly sharp clarity about everything happening around him. He saw right through the performance, finally recognizing the deep and undeniable greed hiding inside the very people who shared his blood. The grief seemed to burn away any lingering illusions, leaving him with nothing but the cold truth about his own children. I remember one specific night, just a few weeks after the funeral, when I was helping him get settled into bed for the evening. He suddenly reached out, squeezing my wrist with a surprising amount of strength, and spoke with a bitterness that I had never heard before. He looked me right in the eyes and said that our family was not waiting for him to recover, but rather they were just waiting for him to finally be done. He knew exactly what they were anticipating, silently calculating the days until they could divide the assets among themselves. My grandfather understood with absolute certainty that they would never allow me to live peacefully in the only home I had ever truly loved. He decided right then that he could no longer rely on their non-existent sense of family loyalty to protect my future. Hearing him say those words out loud was devastating, but that harsh reality completely opened my eyes to the storm that was brewing. I finally realized that the impending war was never going to be about love, fairness, or honoring the people who built this family. It was going to be a ruthless battle fueled purely by entitlement, dark obsession with ownership, and a terrifying level of unchecked greed. A few days later, my grandfather asked me to drive him into town to meet with Arthur, a highly respected and incredibly sharp local estate attorney. We pulled up to a quiet brick building near the center of our Ohio town, keeping the entire trip completely hidden from my parents. Inside that small, unassuming office, my grandfather took the ultimate step to secure my future by establishing an irrevocable living trust. He quietly and decisively transferred the full ownership of the family house directly into this new legal structure, naming me as the sole trustee. Arthur sat across from us, sliding the heavy stack of paperwork across his desk, and made sure I completely understood the gravity of the situation. The lawyer looked me right in the eyes and explained that this transfer was absolutely not meant to be a financial reward. Instead, it was carefully designed to be an impenetrable legal shield, explicitly constructed to protect me from the bottomless greed of my own relatives. My grandfather had spent weeks agonizing over their inevitable betrayal, painstakingly calculating every single risk they might pose after he was gone. He knew exactly how ruthless my family could be when money was involved, so he built a fortress of documents that they could never hope to breach. We spent the entire afternoon going over the fine print, signing every page and meticulously completing all the necessary legal procedures. When we finally drove back home that evening, the secret was locked away safely, ensuring that not a single piece of information would ever leak out. After my grandfather finally passed away, I tried my absolute best to suppress my overwhelming grief and followed Arthur's strict legal advice to the letter, waiting patiently for my family to show their true colors. I carefully prepared a flawless and completely devastating trap inside the old wall safe in the upstairs study, an antique metal box that my parents and my sister had always desperately craved to unlock. They had always assumed that anything of real financial value in the estate had to be locked away in that specific room, making it the perfect stage for their ultimate downfall. I meticulously placed a notarized copy of the irrevocable trust documents deep inside the safe, making sure the legal signatures were perfectly visible to anyone who pulled them out. Right next to those papers, I added a formal confirmation letter from Arthur that validated the immediate transfer of the property, along with a flash drive holding a final audio recording from my grandfather himself. To ensure the message was entirely unmistakable, I set one single sheet of paper resting right on top of everything else, with a piercing handwritten note meant to shatter their arrogant confidence. I understood completely that the impending Friday deadline they so confidently gave me was never actually going to be my eviction date, despite all their cruel and calculated threats. Instead, that upcoming Friday was destined to be the absolute destruction of their delusions of control, and the exact moment they realized they had already lost the war. During those 2 incredibly tense days of waiting, I obediently packed my belongings into cardboard boxes to play the perfect role of a weak woman who had completely surrendered. I deliberately carried those boxes into the guest room, ensuring that anyone glancing through the doorway would firmly believe I was giving up without a fight. While I was putting on this elaborate performance, my sister Jessica was gleefully texting me pictures, excitedly discussing her plans to renovate the kitchen and sell the property outright. I meticulously backed up all of those arrogant text messages, saved every voicemail, and silently forwarded the entire mountain of evidence straight to my attorney, Arthur. My mother actually had the nerve to show up at my door pretending to care, bringing expensive pastries to manipulate me into keeping the family peace. She stood in the foyer begging me not to make things difficult, completely ignoring my deep grief while shamelessly asking me to act like an adult. Later that evening, my father called me with his usual arrogant tone, using deceptive words to force me to leave quietly under the guise of protecting our family's public honor. I simply stayed silent and let them continue acting out their pathetic little play, maintaining a completely cold and indifferent attitude the entire time. I firmly rejected every single one of their fake psychological manipulation attempts, knowing my silence was the best weapon while they unknowingly dug their own graves. Exactly at 5 o'clock on Friday afternoon, all 3 of them arrived with triumphant expressions on their faces, boldly demanding that I hand over the key to the safe. My father led the way into the study like a man who had already won, confident that this was the moment he would finally take control. When the heavy metal door of the safe clicked open, the suffocating atmosphere of pure arrogance in the room was instantly crushed by the naked truth laid out on the papers inside. My father pulled out the top sheet, his eyes moving quickly across my grandfather's final words, and I watched the color completely drain from his pale face. My mother snatched the documents from his hands, her fingers trembling in absolute fear as she realized the undeniable legal reality of the irrevocable trust. Jessica grabbed the papers next, falling into utter panic as her dream of a massive payout shattered before her eyes, completely unable to believe what she was reading. The devastating silence in the study proved that they finally understood the house was legally mine, and they had permanently lost their grand prize. They hastily left the house in humiliating defeat, tossing out a few incredibly weak threats as they walked back to their cars in disgrace. Almost immediately after they drove away, my phone started ringing with a relentless barrage of begging voicemails from my mother, but I firmly refused to answer a single one. When they realized they could not force me to yield using family pressure, my mother immediately changed her tactics to attack my reputation in town. She frantically began spreading vicious rumors everywhere she went, perfectly playing the role of a pitiful, heartbroken mother who had been cruelly abandoned by her selfish daughter. She masterfully spun a fake narrative to anyone who would listen, trying to win the public opinion war by painting me as a greedy villain. Shortly after starting her smear campaign, they officially filed a civil petition against me in the local county court to challenge the irrevocable trust. They blatantly slandered my character in their legal documents, shamelessly claiming that I had maliciously taken advantage of my grandfather's mental confusion during his final days to steal the valuable estate. Instead of getting angry, crying, or desperately trying to explain myself to the gossiping neighbors, I strictly followed Arthur's brilliant legal advice to stay completely composed. I kept a very cool head and meticulously gathered every single pharmacy receipt, medical bill, and detailed daily care log to use as my ultimate weapons for the upcoming legal counterattack. Then, the biggest gift of the entire lawsuit arrived when my careless sister Jessica accidentally sent a text message directly to my phone instead of my mother's. That single mistakenly sent message completely exposed the dark and pathetic truth hiding behind all of their fake, sentimental concerns about our family's legacy. It unintentionally revealed that my father was actually drowning in massive financial debt, and he desperately needed to force a fast sale of the property just to save his failing business from total ruin. At the incredibly tense court hearing, my brilliant attorney Arthur systematically exposed my family's completely fake narrative using an ironclad mountain of undeniable evidence. He calmly and methodically presented the massive binders of medical care history, proving beyond any doubt that I was the only relative who actually showed up to help. Arthur then played the crystal-clear audio recording of my late grandfather directly into the silent courtroom, allowing his true intentions to finally be heard by everyone. The lawyer also dropped the bombshell emails from my sister, exposing their cold and calculated plot to flip the property for a quick profit the moment they got the keys. The absolute fatal blow was delivered when Arthur skillfully cornered my father on the witness stand, forcing him into a devastating corner with nowhere left to hide his lies. My father was publicly forced to admit before the judge that he only wanted control of the valuable estate to solve his crushing personal financial debts, completely destroying his fake claims of honoring our family memories. The judge looked absolutely furious as she glared down at my parents, immediately seeing right through their pathetic manipulation and legally rejecting their baseless lawsuit in its entirety. She officially recognized me as the sole and lawful trustee of the estate, forever securing my legal rights to the home I had sacrificed so much to protect. To ensure my ultimate safety, the judge also issued a strict civil restraining order, legally banning my entire family from approaching me or the property for the next 2 full years. After that brutal court hearing, my father was forced to quietly resign from his fundraising board, Jessica's wedding was postponed indefinitely, and my mother completely lost her public reputation. I peacefully returned to my home, brewed a hot cup of tea, sat on the porch looking at my grandmother's old garden, and enjoyed true freedom after the storm. I did not win because I was smarter or more ruthless than them, but simply because I stayed to care for my grandparents when things became the most difficult. The biggest lesson I learned is that sometimes kindness must be accompanied by evidence, and establishing boundaries to protect yourself from toxicity is never actually selfish. If you have ever had relatives exploit your kindness using the word family, please leave a comment sharing your story so we can all know we are never alone.